In this video, we're going to look at solving quadratic equations by completing the square. And our particular example is going to be x squared minus 2x minus 5 is equal to 0. Now, up until this point, you may want to look at trying to solve this by factoring, but there's no way you can factor this into nice clean numbers because there aren't any factors of 5 that combine to give you a 2. So what we want to do is we're going to rely on completing the square. Now, our first step in completing the square is you want to identify the constant term, the term that just involves a number being added or subtracted. And what you want to do is you want to isolate that from the other terms that involve an x. So in this case, it's on the left-hand side with the other terms. So we need to add 5 to both sides to get that by itself. So rewriting this, we're going to add 5 to both sides, plus 5 here and here. Then we'll have x squared minus 2x. And I'm going to go ahead and leave some space because I'm anticipating the actual completing the square step. So leaving some space there, we're going to say that's equal to 5. And so now we want to identify the linear term, or the term that's connected to just the x. We want to look at that linear coefficient, which in this case is going to be a negative 2. And you want to take the negative 2 and divide by 2. That's going to give us negative 1. And then you want to raise that negative 1 to the second power. That's going to give us positive 1. So anytime that you're trying to complete the square, you look at the term that's attached, the coefficient that's attached to the term with an x, and you just divide it by 2 and then you square it. And whatever you end up with, you're going to add that to both sides of the equation. So we add 1 here and here. And what that's always going to allow you to do is, if you do that properly, it's going to let you factor the left-hand side in this case. So the x squared minus 2x plus 1 will factor into x minus 1, x minus 1. Because two factors of 1 are negative 1 and negative 1, and those combine to give us a negative 2. Of course, 5 plus 1 is going to give us 6 on the right-hand side, and we can rewrite the left-hand side. X minus 1 multiplied by x minus 1 is the same thing as x minus 1 squared, and that's going to be equal to 6. So now we can solve this, get the x by itself, first of all by taking the square root of both sides. So now this kind of like digresses into the square root method. So whenever we take the square root of x minus 1 squared, we're just left with x minus 1. And then on the right-hand side, the square root of 6, that doesn't come out to be a nice clean number, so we'll leave it as the square root of 6, but we need to definitely include the positive and negative versions of those. Because generally we're looking for two, not always, but generally you're going to have two solutions to a quadratic, so you need to always remember when you take the square root, that gives you your two solutions when you do the plus or minus. So now let's solve each of those options. So either x minus 1 is equal to positive square root of 6, or x minus 1 is equal to negative square root of 6. And now we're going to solve each of these by adding 1 to both sides. And so for our first equation, we get x is equal to 1 plus the square root of 6. And I'm just rearranging those terms so that it doesn't look like the 1 is under the square root. And our second equation is going to give us x is equal to 1 minus the square root of 6. And so those are our two solutions. They're not nice clean numbers like we're used to, like a 2 or a 4, but still 1 plus square root of 6 and 1 minus square root of 6, if you were to plug those into the place of x in the original problem, you would get 0 on the left-hand side.